Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're dialing in from. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, team up of sorts with Greenshades and Lathem on accuracy counts, the critical link between time, attendance, and payroll. We got a lot of ground that we want to cover today, so we want to be pretty brisk and watch the clock. So I am going to jump right in. We'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to be covering for today. So first and foremost, we're going to do a quick introduction of each of the two organizations. Chances are you're probably familiar with one, if not both of us, but we do want to give you a quick intro of the speakers on today's call, as well as an overview of each representative company. Then we're going to get into a very brief overview of the environment that we're all working in right now. So there's a lot of interesting challenges and opportunities that are being created as a result of kind of everything we've just gone through over the past couple of years and continue to go through today. So we'll take a look at that specifically through the lens of what that means for time and attendance, payroll, and HR, and how it impacts those of you and your organizations on the call. Then we'll go into talking about this unified approach between time and attendance, payroll, HR, how it's all interconnected and interdependent. And of course, we'll have time for a Q&A session. Now, just a really quick bit of housekeeping notes. You should see on your screen the opportunity to either raise your hand or chat or put in a question. As you should have heard at the top from our operator, all of you are in a listen-only mode. So that Q&A and chat window are really the two primary ways you can interact with us, but we want this to be an interactive session. So anything that pops up as it comes into your mind, please put into one of those boxes, and we'll make sure that we get to it through the duration of the session. All right, without further ado, let me introduce you to the folks that are going to take you through today's session. So first of all, I'm Mark Moschetto. I actually have a consulting group where I focus on helping organizations in their go-to-market strategy, strictly on the business-to-business side of the fence. The majority of my career, which is more the years than I want to mention, has been spent within the payroll, time and attendance, and HR space. And I've had the honor of working with Greenshades since 2019 and helping support the amazing marketing team they've put together there. So I'm going to be your MC of sorts for today's call. The experts that you're going to want to hear from and learn from today are Tom Worth from Greenshades and Lance Whipple from Lathem Time. So gentlemen, welcome. Why don't we go through and do a quick intro? Tom, let's start with you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark. My name is Tom Worth. I am from Greenshades. I am the payroll and benefits coordinator with the company. So what that means is that I handle doing payroll every 2 weeks for the company itself, as well as handle all the benefits too. So I'm actually in an interesting scenario where I use our products. I'm actually an end user, so I'm usually the best test subject for a lot of the stuff that we do, kind of the guinea pig. So because of that, I had the honor of doing the first stab at the payroll product to go through it and make sure it was working as intended. So.
Veteran, source of truth. Thanks, Tom. Lance.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Tom and Mark, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Lance Whipple. I'm vice president at Lathem. I oversee most sales, marketing, go-to-market stuff, including customer success, and also driving a lot of our new product innovation and new product launches. I've been with the company since 1994. 28 years now. So I started when I was 12, I think, or that's my story, at least. I'm sticking with it. But anyway, one of the things I'm really proud of is I helped launch our software and our automated product line in 1995. So it's now a 27-year-old mature product that's evolved over the times, and have a lot of experience with businesses just like yours, and looking forward to spending a few moments with you today and talking about the problems and solutions out there. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll do a quick overview of each organization. So let's start off with one near and dear to my heart, Greenshades.
Yes, as you can see on the slide, we're currently celebrating our 20th anniversary, which is great. Initially, we saw ourselves as problem solvers. We started offering solutions to fill the feature gaps of the most popular accounting packages. Eventually, we found that the biggest gap that we had for ourselves was just payroll itself. So we created a payroll module that is the foundation for our payroll and HR platform. The platform guides your employees through the process of onboarding and continues all the way to year-end distribution and filings. So everything that's on the list, you kind of go through it all. Payroll, HR features, benefit management. Employees have the option to go through and submit everything themselves. So electronically through a employer portal that everyone has.
Awesome. Very cool end-to-end functionality there. And Lance, why don't you give us a walkthrough of the century plus old Lathem brand?
Yeah, so kudos to Greenshades on 20 years. We've got 100 years under our belt, or a little more now. But the company was started in 1919 in Atlanta, Georgia, where we still are today. So believe it or not, yes, time and attendance time clocks were one of the first products that businesses realized they needed a solution for. So just a small side story on time clocks. First time clock in the United States was built in 1900 by a company called International Time Recorder that in 1912 changed their name to International Business Machines, or IBM. So the start of IBM was time recording. So it was a business process that needed automation, and IBM tackled it. We were happy to pick up the ball and run with it for the next 100 years. So we are experts in time and attendance. That's all we do. So we are solely focused on helping employers and companies track their employees' time and get them paid. Over the years, we've sold well over 1 million time clocks. So we have a lot of experience in the challenges that businesses face, the environments that they're in, and the proper solutions to address those needs. And we're really proud that today our product has evolved. So we've gone from traditional machines that print on paper, everything's becoming digital. So we've gone through digital transformation, SaaS, cloud-based solutions. Our SaaS product today is processing over 30 million punches using business logic behind the scenes to make our customers' lives easier and solve those problems. So we're real excited to talk to you today about what the challenges are and how we can help you solve those challenges. So thank you.
Awesome. Great stuff. And Lance, I think we've got a poll coming up here. So do you want to take us through the poll?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's I think it would be really helpful to kind of level set and find out how you as an employer are currently tracking your hourly employees, your non-exempt employees' time. What I have learned over the years is that no two businesses are the same, and everyone has a little bit differently. This is a multi-select poll, by the way. So the other thing I've learned is that a lot of companies have different types of employees, and they track their time differently. Instead of a unified, there's different solutions that have evolved over time. So if we could just take a minute, if you can click any of the boxes that apply to your company, we'll wait here for a second, and then we'll move on to the rest of the presentation.
Hey, Lance, just a question for you while we're doing the poll here. When you work with organizations and have like multiple sites, are you seeing that there's any kind of lumpiness, for lack of a better term, in terms of how they're collecting time? Like, are some doing biometric and some are doing traditional clocks and others are doing paper? Or do you see them usually standardized across the enterprise?
Yeah, we see it normally different types, and it's not by location, Mark. It's typically by type of employee. So you have employees that potentially are working at a computer during the day, those that are working on a shop floor, maybe you have drivers, different management, different departments, they're different work styles, so they're using different methods of timekeeping.
Okay.
That's typically what we see.
Got it. Makes sense. That's great. Thank you. So it looks like we've got a pretty healthy mix across the board, with the exception of very few are using nothing or the honor system, which is interesting / heartening. Not that the honor system is fading out, but it's great that there are these more kind of automated means in place, right?
Yes, you'll be in good graces with the Department of Labor. Good job.
Great. Awesome. All right, so thanks everyone for participating in that. We're gonna move on to the next part of the presentation, and we're titling this section "New World, Higher Stakes," and the reason why we do that is that so much has happened over the past 2 years in particular that have really done a couple of things. One is it's accelerated the pace of change. It's accelerated how quickly and really how deeply organizations are starting to embrace technology, particularly on the HR, payroll, time and attendance side of the world. The other part of it is that it is putting, again, the organizations that helm these technologies much more front and center in terms of how they're viewed strategically and the strategic value they bring to the business. So, I think this is probably applied a lot more to the folks in the HR space, but this whole concept of a seat at the table, right? Like having HR and payroll and some of these other technologies and organizations kind of having a senior level role and having visibility and part of strategy discussions. Well, based on everything from recruiting to retention to employee engagement, we really gotten that and then some. And, it's not just kind of a feel good thing either. So you'll see there's a couple of stats and a couple of references here that I pulled from Sapient Insights Group. Every year they do an awesome, very, very deep industry survey that's on organizations like yours, actually speaking to the employers about what trends they're seeing, what technologies they're using, and things like that. And you can see here that organizations that treat HR as a strategic function see an 11% increase in positive business outcomes. So again, it's not just kind of it's now measurable. You can see the impact that these roles being elevated can have on the business. And another thing they do is they look at what are the factors that contribute to success or barriers to success. And look at these couple of bullets here. So effective time, absence, and leave management systems were all highlighted as key contributors to those things that are going to help a business to improve, to be operationally better and more efficient, more cost effective. The other side of that is some of the biggest barriers that they have seen is when payroll is handled manually. And if there are not those mobile resources that Lance mentioned, right, to capture all these employees that are maybe not working within a physical location anymore. So, more than ever before, accuracy has always mattered in our worlds, but based on what's going on in the world today, based on how things are evolving, that's really just had the volume turned way up on it. So let's talk about how do you make it happen? How do you introduce those levels of efficiency and effectiveness within your business? So if you're like most businesses, you probably have a mix of employee types, right? You have remote and on-premise. You have some folks that are doing one or the other. You have individuals that have probably moved to other locations during the pandemic to take advantage of remote working. You still need to make sure that you have a consistent, cohesive place for each of these individuals to be able to capture time and activity and attendance, and again, bring it all into a unified system. So again, some organizations you might have the physical clocks on the wall, and some you might actually have be using the mobile or the web interface. So the key is to have this kind of harmonizing element amongst all of them. Piggybacking on top of that, payroll absolutely has to be accurate and timely and complete. And that there's a number of reasons to go into that. We'll unpack that a little more on the next slide and in the slides coming up. But in addition to that accuracy component, there's also a heavy compliance component too, right? So those of you on the call who are in the payroll and the finance world know that you've got your federal policies, you've got state-specific policies, but depending upon where you're located, you might even have city or even a smaller subdivision of city guidances and locations that you need to adhere to from a tax policy standpoint. So it can get pretty complex pretty quickly, especially as you start to look at having a larger or more mobile or a deskless workforce. And then that's kind of the stuff you need to do day in, day out, with each payroll run. But then, of course, as you come up to the end of the year, you have all of your end of year processing. You have to get your forms out to your employees. You have to get forms out to the regulatory bodies. And again, on time, error free, not a lot of room for flexibility there. So, as we look at all of those different pieces and all those different elements that kind of line up to accuracy, these are some of the interesting nuances that you're contending with right now. All right. So let's talk a little bit now about the stakes, right? So we've talked about the need for accuracy, but what happens when you have inaccuracies that pop up? So the key thing to remember here is that it's a snowball effect, right? So if your time and attendance and labor activity information isn't complete at the point of capture, then you're passing along incomplete or erroneous information for payroll calculations. When you're doing pay and tax calculations based on erroneous information, that means you're going to be cutting paychecks that aren't correct. You cut paychecks that aren't correct, that bites you in a couple of different areas. One is you've got to do corrective pay runs, which is a drag organizationally and from a cost perspective on your internal teams. But then also it's a tremendous drain on the employee. And I think it was CNBC that recently did a poll, and they found that 64% of workers are now living paycheck to paycheck. So especially in an economy like this, when those errors are made and employees aren't getting all that they were expecting or have earned, it really bites into things like employee engagement, employee dissatisfaction. That can really have a negative impact on your brand. And as we're in this kind of weird place where we have an employment crunch going on as well, where it's hard to find and retain talent, that's a really hard, long-lasting impact that can be tough to shake if you're consistently doing these inaccuracies. And then the other part of that is, any of the punitive action or anything like that you might get from regulatory bodies. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot at stake right now. You know how critically important your job is, and like the market data is there to support that and back that up. So not to paint a negative picture, these are all the challenges, but it's absolutely avoidable. And that's what we're going to spend the remainder of the presentation looking at, is how can we help you to avoid the negative impact, and how can we help you to avoid these inaccuracies collectively as a time and attendance, payroll, and HR provider. So with that, before we hand over to our experts, we're going to look at poll question number 2. So if you wouldn't mind launching into that, that would be great. So this is anonymous, so feel free to answer to answer directly and bluntly. But how frequently do you have to conduct corrective or off-cycle pay runs? Do you do it often? Do you have to do it sometimes, like once every few payroll runs? Infrequently, maybe a handful of times each year, or you're just not sure? Just let us know when, as we come through. So, Lance, being the resident payroll helmsman and guru on the call, what's the kind of the real world impact of some of these corrective pay runs? Like, how much of a hassle is that in your day to day?
I think you meant Tom, so we're going to turn that one over to Tom, because
I'm sorry,
he's
Tom,
the expert
I
here.
apologize. Sorry, man. No, I'm throwing you a curveball. Let's see how well you read our stuff.
Sure. As far as off-cycle pay runs and mistakes, really it can be detrimental to the employee, just because that takes time to do corrections. They'll get their funds later than they would expect to. But yeah, fortunately, I mean, hopefully you don't have them very often. So I see that so far, that might be the case. So that's the hope.
Yeah, so let's close out the poll and see how everyone on the call is doing with that. There we go. So pretty good. 8% have it often. 24% sometimes, and the majority have it infrequently. So that's fantastic. That's really good to hear. For all the reasons that we just got into, that's great. That means that you're running a tight ship, and it's good to know. All right. So now we're going to move on to challenges and opportunities. How do you overcome it? How do you create greater efficiency? And how can we help you out? So I am now going to hand over to Lance, not to Tom. Got the name right this time. Lance, why don't you take it away and walk us through? Kick us off here.
All right, well, let's take a look at some of the challenges that companies typically have when we're talking about time tracking and time and attendance for their employees. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see here, the American Payroll Association has done a number of surveys and studies on what it really costs a company when there is inaccuracies in time tracking or employee time theft. Employee time theft is a broad category of issues, and I'm going to talk through some of those challenges that a lot of companies have. But you can do the math yourself. 10% of payroll, if you're paying an employee $50,000, $5,000 a year in lost payroll productivity. So it's an important part of business. It's an important thing to get a hold of, and it has an immediate return on your company. So the first issue being buddy punching, that is an element of time theft. Buddy punching just being the concept that an employee is not present when they're supposed to be present and you're going to pay them. So this is an hourly non-exempt employee you have a contract with for an hour's work for an hour's pay. And so the concept is here when they're not here, whether it be a fellow employee who says, hey, clock me in and out, or even a manager that could be their friend and say, hey, you know, I'm coming in late, just say I got here at 8, I was scheduled to work, no problem. Okay, so that is a challenge. All businesses face it. Businesses that have an absentee manager or supervisor find it more prevalent, but all businesses face this challenge. Inaccurate work location, similar to buddy punching. So you expect someone to be somewhere. So they're supposed to be somewhere working. You don't really care that they checked in with you. They're supposed to be where they're supposed to be when they're working. That's a challenge for some companies to really know and have confidence that that employee is where they're supposed to be when they're starting to get paid and when they're finishing the day. The other challenge that we see a lot is failing to capture everything in a single system. So the poll question that we started off with, if you recall, gave you a bunch of options. I haven't seen the detailed data, but I would imagine several of you checked more than one. And so you're doing different things for different people. The problem with that is you can have inconsistent application of your rules and policies, the way you're paying employees, and it really just opens an employer up to issues with the Department of Labor wage hour division when you're inconsistently applying rules because you're using different methods of tracking employee time based on that employee's job or role within the company. The next one is a big issue, which is incorrect or inconsistent application of rounding or other rules. Other rules being, how do you handle people that come in a few minutes late, a few minutes early? What if an employee takes a short meal, or an employee supposed to take a break for 10 minutes and they're taking 20-minute breaks? So in a lot of systems where you're not using automation, it's really difficult to ensure that not only does your company have the policy, but it's enforcing the policy properly using a fair system across all of your employee types of tracking their time for payroll. And then another challenge we see quite often is just, you know, let's just say you got the data 100% correct. That data has to come from your timekeeping system into payroll. Mark eloquently laid out the challenges that if you mispay employees, you're going to have a lot of problems. You're going to have a lot of unhappy employees. And one of the reasons that happens is simple miskeying, mistyping, transferring data incorrectly, moving from disparate systems into one, and that data becomes inaccurate. So that's the problem. I don't want to paint, like Mark said, a bleak picture. The great thing is there are some elegant solutions to offer to solve all these issues, and I'm just going to talk through them really quickly at each level. So for buddy punching, if we can move on to the solutions.
Absolutely. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So for buddy punching, you've all probably heard of biometric timekeeping. Okay, biometric timekeeping is basically ensuring that the employee who said they were there are clocking in and out, it was them, using some unique trait from themselves. So the two primary systems for biometric tracking are fingerprint sensors. You've all seen them before, fingerprint readers. You touch your finger or your thumb, and it is using a pattern analysis of that employee to identify them. Facial recognition has become a very fast adopting technology because it's passive, easy to use. Employees don't have to touch anything. When you implement a biometric clock, you're 100% guaranteed that the person that made that transaction is the person that was clocking in, and you've agreed to pay them to start or finish the day, and it is them, and it's not their manager, and it's not their friend. Okay. The other issue with work locations, so if you have employees that do different jobs, let's take, for example, you have a company where you have drivers. They clock in, let's say in the morning, that's fine. But at the end of the day, they take their trucks home or their vehicles home, but they clock out when they leave the customer site. So today there's technology that's available. When an employee clocks out, if they're doing it remotely, it'll record the GPS coordinates. At any time, a manager or supervisor can pull up that punch and see exactly on a map where that was located. Also, by the way, location is also a physical time clock device. We see a lot of customers that if you install a time clock and someone clocks in and on that time clock, you know exactly where they are. So if they're working in an environment in a manufacturing or somewhere where those employees all need to be there, they're not filling out a timesheet, they're not writing on a piece of paper, they're not emailing you a spreadsheet. You know that they've clocked in and they were there where they were supposed to work. So a physical time clock ensures that the employee's at the location where they're supposed to be. The failing to capture in a single system. So we've been talking about this a lot. It is a big one. If you're a different type of employee and you have a different manager or a different role within the company, you may have your time tracked differently. Again, that causes all kinds of issues. It's not only time consuming and tedious for the person that has to do payroll, it's also prone to errors, okay? So the great part is the solutions that are available today understand that and understand that you need multiple ways to record time, but applying all your same policies and rules fairly and consistently amongst all your employees. The rounding rules we talked about, these are business rules, business logic rules, and automation. And by the way, one of the things I didn't mention is that one of the huge benefits of automating time and attendance is the time it takes to actually get the hours ready for payroll. Right. We have customers, and I hear this all the time, that it took them at least a day to get the hours worked ready just to even key into payroll. With a fully automated solution, that goes down to minutes, hours or minutes typically. So you're buying back a lot of your own time. You're not only ensuring 100% accurate payroll, you're ensuring that it's applied fairly and consistently, but you're saving a ton of time doing that process, which is a huge benefit across the board. And then double keying and just keying in mistakes. So making sure that you spent all this time and you've addressed all these other issues and you've got accurate time data, but then you're relying on some manual process to get it to the payroll to final paycheck. We're really excited to partner with a company like Greenshades to eliminate that issue completely. So the products integrate, the time transfer seamlessly. There's no rekeying of data. Those things are really important, and those solutions are available today. So we're real excited about what's available. We know there's big challenges. A lot of your companies are facing it, but the solutions are simple, easy to use, low investment, and with a huge, huge return on the bottom line.
Awesome. And kind of mirroring that on the payroll side, Tom, you want to take us through some of the common challenges that we typically see there?
Sure. So as a payroll professional myself, accuracy is one of the most important things. So I definitely know that fear of an employee reaching out to you on the Friday of payroll with just the words, "Hey Tom, ... and then you're waiting to hear the rest of what he's going to say. So some common challenges that are out there. Number one, of course, tax withholding errors. Mark was saying specifically about with what happened with the pandemic, we moved to being mostly a remote company at this point. So initially we had about 8 states that we were in, then we got up to about 26. So that's a whole lot of things to try to remember, like what this state has local withholdings, the state does not. The state has 4 pseudo rates that your employee has to pay into as well. So just knowing those things, and also employees moving themselves to different states that have different withholding tax laws, different withholding codes themselves. Just getting those into the system and making sure they're correct is a big hurdle, especially if you're doing all this stuff on paper, that kind of thing. Erroneous Social Security information, just having a bad Social Security number makes end of year a whole lot of fun, especially if you're a larger company that has a lot of temporary employees that give you the social, they write it down for you on your new hire paperwork. It comes over to you, you read it, it's like, is this a 2, it's a 7, or it's a really fancy 9? Not really sure which. But by that point, the employee's moved on, and it's hard to connect with them. So Social Security information can be a huge thing as well. Missing an update or a change to a tax policy. Rates change all the time, as well as just what some states are requiring. So Massachusetts was a big one here recently, by adding in some additional taxes and then removing them and then updating them to something different. It's been a whole thing with them. So just keeping on top of the compliance can be an issue as well. Incorrect withholding of garnishments, specifically if an employee hasn't made enough to cover the garnishment. Different states have different methods about going through and making sure you did it correctly, to do the right withholding from that employee. And of course, manual workarounds to accommodate software limitations. The biggest thing that happened recently was, of course, COVID. And there were all of these different things that we had to do in order to kind of like the time for people that took time off. A lot of the packages out there were not going to do anything to accommodate for that. So we had to do a lot of weird things to make sure that we were recording it correctly. So I have a nice Excel sheet myself that just has a ton of stuff that if you looked at it, you have no idea what's going on, but I assure you it makes sense. We had to do that to make sure that we got everything correct, because some softwares just didn't work out right. So.
All right.
So
And
there are some, so there are some solutions that we have for those things themselves. Automate onboarding for W-4 and I-9 completion. So one thing that we have is we have an onboarding module where the employee is sent a link that they go through with the HR person and they set up everything themselves. They type in their information and they can go through and set that up themselves. So that way there's no data transfer issues between the HR person, the employee, and then whoever puts it into the system themselves. So Automatica goes into there, captures that, as well as anything else that you want. But we'll go more into onboarding here in a little bit. Erroneous Social Security information. We actually have real-time validation and notifications where it'll go through and it'll run the information for that employee and let you know that if the number itself is incorrect or if the legal name that's on file is incorrect as well. So you can go through and find that out very quickly before it's an issue. Missing an update or change to a tax policy. With the systems that we have in place, we automatically notify and apply any changes to those taxes. We do it all on the back end, so there's nothing you have to go through and update, anything like that. The worst thing is whenever it's you have a on-prem solution and an update goes out, but you have to log into the manufacturer's website, find what version of the software you have and manually update. And that email went to IT and hopefully that IT person looked at it. So in a timely manner. So not speaking from experience on that one at all, right? So incorrect withholding of garnishments. There are automatic rule calculations that our system does as well, where if they don't have quite enough on their paycheck, it'll automatically connect and show what their wages that they would apply to the garnishment. Manual workarounds. Our platform is 100% automation. We can go through and you can actually go through and adjust it to say exactly what you want out of it. So if you have a specific way of doing your payroll, it'll go through and we have the options to adjust for that preference. So
awesome. And so I think through the discussion we've been able to see challenges, opportunities, and how an automated approach in each of those two worlds can kind of bring it all together and derive better outcomes for you. But now let's look at what happens when you unify these two together as well. So Tom, I think we had another poll question we wanted to do, right?
We do. This one's about integration specifically. Just kind of seeing how integrated your systems are currently. So if all of them are fully connected with each other, some are not. It's a mix of standalone systems that you use, manual or not really sure.
Great. And I'm anxious to see the results of this one just because, we're seeing so much bleed over right across all these different areas. And I think that, I've been in the time and attendance space for a long time. And I was really heartened and excited to see the results from that Sapient survey that shows how, time and attendance is now really being tightly tied to positive outcomes, how automating payroll and configurable payroll, like what Greenshades brings to the table, is seen as important already too. And, Lance, because we've been in the space, we've always known how critical time and attendance has been, but did you see that coming? Did you think that we'd start to see that being called out in research and being highlighted as such a critical part of operational success?
It's not surprising to me. It is surprising to me how many, just anecdotally, if you talk to people, talk to your friends, and I'm sure you don't talk to your friends about their time clocks, but I do. How many don't address that issue? But if you look at your company's most valuable asset, it's your staff, it's your workforce. And if you look at one of your highest expenses, it's payroll. It's your it's your payroll. So the concept of a fair day's pay for a fair day's work is extremely important. Making sure to get it right the first time is becoming much more important in today's climate, job climate. So it's critical. It's one of those things that you could get by with in the past. It's you don't really have that luxury anymore. It has to be a good system. You have to make sure you're getting your dollar's worth out of your payroll, and you got to make sure your employees are getting paid fairly. It's important.
And Tom, appreciate the real world pains that you've gone through. That one of the cool things about Greenshades is so many folks that are on board the organization here have like boots on the ground practitioner experience, and Tom's a prime example of that. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, certainly. I'm sure a lot of people here can commiserate on some of those.
Definitely. All right, so 14% have seamless. Interesting, 37% have loose, and 35% aren't integrated at all. So that's interesting. It's also great news because there's great opportunities to be able to drive further automation and further efficiency in your organization by getting that interconnectedness, turned up a notch or two. So as fate would have it, that's what we're going to be covering through the duration of the discussion leading up into our Q&A session. So how does it all come together, and really how does one system feed into each other? And it's not really like this depicts it as a linear approach, but really when you think about specifically the time tracking and the payroll side of the world, it's more cyclical, right? So, as Tom talked about, the taking new employees in, getting all that information in accurately, having those real-time validations so you know that the information is accurate from the source. That's very important. So that's kind of the HR function side of what the Greenshades platform delivers. Another component of that, which is kind of an ongoing piece, is it also gives visibility into paychecks. It gives employees an opportunity whenever there's a life event, whenever there's a change of address. It delivers a higher degree of employee self-service. And what's wonderful about that is not only is it less taxing for the HR and payroll personnel, but also it's empowering for the employee too, right? Like I know when I do benefit elections or anything like that, like I sit down with my wife and go, okay, well, let's get on the same page with this. Let's make sure that Mark isn't, being an idiot and putting the wrong thing in. So it allows them to do it on their time and do it independently. Certainly the time tracking piece is that daily, sometimes multiple times per day, as Lance had talked about, some of the things that some of the different industries where you're capturing time and activity, and you might be changing jobs or tasks during the day, that really allows you to capture it wherever that point of work is being done. And there's certainly a lot of options there that Lance had showed us. And again, that feeds into the payroll side with all of the real-time tax calculations, all of the integration with your financial systems is a key component, particular ERP systems, right? And then that year-end processing piece. So yes, there is a whole host of things that you need to do, as you know, as you come up to the end of the year, whether it's filing with regulatory bodies or just getting those documents back out to the employees so they can do their taxes in a timely fashion as well. So when you've got a unified system and you have that high degree of interoperability, there's a degree of automation, there's a degree of smoothness, there's a degree of completeness that comes with that. And as Lance and Tom both mentioned, when you do that manual entry, that certainly ups the opportunity for errors to creep into the process. And that unified approach just takes that right down. So when you look at our organization specifically, Lathem and Greenshades, we've got a lot in common between our two organizations, which is what make us a great team. Both have strong roots within the SMB, the small and medium-sized business market. We know your needs are unique. We also know that sometimes with other organizations, you can kind of feel like that little fish, big pond syndrome. So customer support, customer care is absolutely vital to each of our two organizations. And that's something that's so critical to be on the same page about, really, when you're working with technology providers. So all the platforms, both of our organizations, highly configurable, right? We'll unpack that a little more here too, but you've heard already, being able to tailor functionality and capabilities to your specific needs as a business. And again, both organizations are field proven. Lance has quite a flex over us with 100 years over 20, but 20 years is nothing to sneeze at. And Greenshades has been driving a lot of that, particularly on the client side of the equation. I mean, the compliance.
Hey, Mark, if
regulatory
I could
pieces, right?
interject one thing as well about
Please.
this. One thing that I think is really exciting is this integrated approach is not just for large enterprise. Okay, so it used to be you're a big company, you didn't have an option to do this all manually. You just couldn't do payroll. So what's really exciting is technology has advanced to a point where you can be as small as a 20 employee company, have full integration end to end, have all the benefits that the big companies had to have because they couldn't practically do payroll. Very cost effective, very easy to implement and get going. So the most exciting thing to me is this integrated approach that solves this problem for the big enterprise, solves it for any size business now. And so that's what's exciting.
I love it. Spot on, Lance. Great observation. So yeah, we're excited about what we're bringing to bear for the market collectively, and now we'll have Tom, I think, kick off with the next little bit to give a little more details on how that all comes together and what some of the benefits are.
Sounds good. So we are a cloud-based platform. Everything is located, nothing is located on your personal computer, which is good. There's a dedicated payroll and HR platform, staff focus on proactive monitoring and managing and addressing change. So we have groups of people. Number one, we have a large compliance team that their whole thing is to make sure that we're within compliance for any tax changes, any updates that have to happen. Then we have developers and everything that actually work on those changes to make sure they're implemented before or when it's time for that update. There's a tailored approach designed for your unique needs. So like I said earlier, we do have a lot of options as far as our software itself. So depending on how you run your payroll, what you need as far as the employees' access to their information, their pay history, anything like that, you have complete control over what you want your employees to see, and also a lot of the options as far as how your payroll is actually ran inside of the system itself. You have complete control of that, and documents too for your HR needs as well. Add-on services to enhance the employee experience. Like I said, that's giving the employee more access to things that they have right there on their employer site. One thing that they can do is they can update their direct deposit information electronically, so you don't have to worry about manually keying it in. They have access to all their HR documents, so if they need a copy of their employee handbook, they don't have to track down HR, they have it readily available at any given time. It also makes it easy so that if you ever have to send out a new document or anything to a bunch of employees, you want them to sign off on it, they can log into the site, it's going to tell them it's there, they can log in and just go ahead and knock it out right then and there. So it gives your employees a whole lot of power that they have. They can also log in and do qualifying life events, as was previously stated. So benefit management is quite a bit easier and less hiccups. There's also a dedicated support team to ensure that you're never alone. We have both an implementation team that helps people get started into the product itself. Then we have dedicated support as well in different teams for the different products that we have. So if you have an issue, there's going to be someone that is a professional on that product that can help you out with it. No issues. So as far as onboarding goes, we have an onboarding module where I kind of talked about earlier, where it is a link that goes out to the employee that HR can sit in with them if they'd like to go through and set up everything electronically, where the employee types in all of their information themselves. So it's not going to get lost in a mix-up between people. They put in their personal information, social securities and everything are verified and make sure that's correct. They can go through and they can set up their W-4 information, their I-9s. There's also a welcome wizard that you can go through and you can actually update that to your company's needs. So if you require that all of your employees must sign the employee handbook the day that they start, you can actually have that as part of the onboarding process. So you can easily put in special documents just for your employees that have to fill it out. I think I ran through all of these actually, just by talking. But it's a very nice, easy way of getting all of your employee information directly into your system by your employee doing it, which is great. Automatic updates, because we're cloud-based, everything is pushed out at one time by Greenshades. There's no worries about, having to manually go through and double check some things. So one of the worst things is whenever a jurisdiction updates a tax rate on you, that you have, the only way you really find out, because the state's not very good at, communication a lot of times, is by logging into their site and manually checking the rate. Hopefully you do that before you run your first payroll. Instead of having to go through that, what if it just updated on the back end all by itself? So that's basically what we do. We go through, we update the rates that have to be updated at any given time. The ones that we can't do are going to be, of course, SUTA, because that's going to be based upon your personal rate from your company. So it also addresses any additional changes that happen. Like I said earlier, like whenever new taxes are added, we're going to automatically update those on our end. If there are new filings that have to go out, then we're going to update and create those filings so that way they can be done through Greenshades, is what we try to do. Stress-free reciprocity agreements. So if you're in a state where, a great example I always love is New Jersey, and you work in New York, always a great example. So, because it happens a lot. If the state has a reciprocity agreement between those, the system is going to automatically go through and calculate what their taxes are supposed to be and charge the correct rates for both of those. A lot less guesswork and a lot less information you have to do by Googling and double checking the what you have inside of your system. Individual tax prep. We do have a system called the Payroll Tax Service, where it's going to take your totals that we create for you from the payroll product, and it's going to automatically create your filings and your payments, where you can go through and submit them automatically just by pressing a button. You go through, you double check and make sure everything looks right. If it is, just press the button and you're submitting all of your stuff directly to the state without having to manually log in and adjust and submit things yourself. Alrighty, a big thing that happened around 2015 was the ACA. I know there was a whole lot of things that were uncertain about it at the time, and there's a lot of things that you have to do to make sure that you are in compliance for each individual employee. One thing that we have is the automatic ACA adherence, where on the home screen itself, it's going to calculate whether or not your employees do qualify for ACA based upon a few different factors. But it'll give you a warning and let you know which employees that you need to either offer coverage to or to make an adjustment. And that pops up and you have those alerts whenever you want them before it becomes an issue at end of the year. Stress-free deductions garnishments. So like we said before, what it does is the system is going to calculate based upon your location and your work location what your taxes are supposed to be. So it's going to do it automatically. It's going to do the rates and everything for you, as well as if you make less for a garnishment, it's going to calculate what the correct amount is supposed to be, depending on which state that you're in. Same thing with minimum wage compliance. So if you are in a field where you have tips and the employee doesn't quite make enough to cover that, the system is going to see that and apply whatever the current minimum wage law is in your state, which is helpful to make sure you're in compliance as well.
Really powerful collection of capabilities and functionality. And again, we talk about, Tom covered a lot of ground around the automation side and how that demystifies the process and takes some of those heavier lifting items off your plate. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of value that's been conveyed there. Tom, awesome job capping it over. So Lance, take us through, some of the key features and key elements of the Lathem collection. I know some great technology. You guys are crushing it over there.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and good job, Tom, explaining, the issues and the opportunities there with payroll. But as we talked about earlier, it's getting the data in there accurately is really important. So when looking at time and attendance, we use the term time and attendance simplified, is that this really needs to be a process that's easy to use and easy to implement within your company. I mentioned earlier about different employee types or different departments in way people get paid differently within your company. And that really means when you're looking for a solution, you're really looking for a solution that addresses all those needs. So from the physical time clock devices, you have proximity card readers that are just like your access control system that'll record time in and out. The biometric solutions, whether they be like the two I mentioned, fingerprint or face recognition as an option for that work environment. But imagine a company where, let's say you're a manufacturer and you're making a product and you have a shop floor where you're building, you're probably gonna have a physical time clock device there. People come and go, they clock in and out, you know they're there, you know if you're using biometric, you've eliminated the buddy punching issue. But then you have, as I mentioned before, you may have drivers that have to deliver stuff. So maybe they're clocking in and out on mobile devices, and maybe you have a call center. Well, they're in front of their computer. They're not gonna have to walk out to the shop floor and clock in and out. You can have them clock in and out at a web portal or a web clock on their computer. So having this kind of unified option, and again, really trying to take your rules of your business and apply them consistently and fairly, requires you to really have the option of collecting time no matter how an employee works or where they work. So we're real excited to have built a platform or a portfolio of solutions built over 100 years of experience, understanding the different work environments and understanding how employees need to enter their time, and building this into a unified system and a unified approach to data collection or time collection. The big one being error-free calculations is extremely important. So if you're doing it manually, I mentioned the time savings. If you imagine a law of averages, if someone messes up calculating hours for an employee and they end up getting paid a little bit more that pay period, you're not going to hear about that, right? So they're just going to get extra pay. But if you short them $1 or $2, you're going to hear about it. So you're going to hear about every mistake where you're shorting an employee. You're not going to hear about anything where you're overpaying an employee because you're not calculating the time correctly. So there's a lot of logic behind that. So we talked about things like calculating regular and overtime as a minimum. But let's say your company has a contract with a union and you need to pay premium time, or a company works on a holiday, or a company's worked 7 consecutive days. In some states, you have to pay overtime. So all that logic has to be done. It has to be done accurately. That could take someone a lot of time to do it manually. It's prone to error. Having a system that you can rely on, you put a stream of punches in there and it's going to give you accurate worked hours based on the rules, is extremely important. The big one, what I think I've learned over the years is if you're going to pull this off and to be successful, it's got to be easy, okay? So a complex, complicated system is not going to be well adopted. You're going to get tons of pushback. We built our products from the ground up to be extremely easy to implement and to use for employees, okay? So the secret sauce is taking technology and taking what is fairly complicated to do and making it simple. Things like with our systems, when an employee clocks in and out, they don't have to push any buttons, they don't have to do anything. We call it swipe and go or punch and go. It's taking a steady stream of punches and based on artificial intelligence and business logic, knowing whether they were coming or going and calculating that time. The other big thing here is if you're in charge of payroll and you're in charge of HR, not everything has to fall on your shoulders. So having a system where you can enlist the help of the managers that are responsible for their employees, pushing that down, distributing the workload to the managers that are responsible for their employees is extremely, extremely important. You get a ton of benefit. So for example, in our system, you can have as many supervisors as you want. We don't charge extra for administrators or supervisors, but you basically put them responsible for their employees. You assign the departments or the employees. When they log into the software, they only see their employees. They see their reports and dashboards they need to see. We actually go a step further and we say, well, do they really need to look at every punch? No. What they really need to look at is exceptions. So did someone miss a punch? Did someone take a long break? Did someone leave early? We highlight those things. We let them step through them in a few minutes. They can approve a time card. And if you're the person that's going to export the data for payroll, you know it's been approved by the administrator or the supervisor. It's extremely important to make that easy for everybody along the whole chain there. So that's extremely important. And then you've gone to all this trouble to track the data. Let's leverage it. So we provide over 50 standard reports, all which can be customized. You can have these reports all printed out or exported or scheduled email. So let's say every Monday you want to see a report of who's going to be off that week. You can have that emailed to you in the morning. But the data is all there. Reports like approaching overtime, missed punch reports, things of that nature are all available for the current data, for historical data, for labor analytics, and it's all available in the system at a few clicks of the mouse. So having that system, making it simple, making it do the work for you, that's what we do. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about what we think the secret sauce of Lathem or why customers would implement. So if you're going to go through this effort of implementing time tracking for your company, you want to make sure you're doing it with a company you can trust. Okay, so Latham, we've been around 100 years. We treat our customers like our employees, and that's family. So we treat them everybody like family. We start with this 5-point assurance, okay? So it's free installation, setup, and assistance for anything that you buy for time tracking. So with our systems and the way they're designed, you're literally up and running in hours or days, not weeks or months, okay? So this is not you get an implementation team and we're doing an assessment or analysis. If you bought high-end products before, that's the model. That's not our model. Our model is you call us, we talk with your sales rep, they figure out what you want and what you need for your product. We ship it out the same day. You probably have it tomorrow. If you've ever installed a printer on your network, that's how easy it is. And you're up and running the next day, most of our customers. So it's a very low upfront investment of time. So everything's backed by our call center in Atlanta. If you like Southern accents, you'll enjoy calling in to talk to our support team. But I think the average tenure of our support reps are 18 years right now. And you have any questions at any time, you pick up the phone and you give us a call. Okay, and so we stand behind 100%, no charge for that as well. The clocks. So the clocks, if you've got physical devices, become an extremely important part of your business. So if you're using time clocks to clock in and out and something were to happen, something were to go down, that's kind of mission critical at that point, right? So what we do is any device that you have, if we can't troubleshoot it, fix it remotely over the phone, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to ship out that same day a replacement to you overnight. Okay, so you're back up and running the next day. You plug it in, it automatically syncs up all the data. Employees are clocking in and out almost immediately. Okay. The other thing is this eliminating the concept of buyer's remorse or long-term commitments. We're not out to get someone to sign some 3-year contract or anything like that. The system has to solve the problem that it was designed for. We're not trying to lock you into anything. You sign up for what, we help you identify what you need. If you have any issues with it, just send it back to us to give you all your money back, no big deal. And we don't ask for a long-term commitment. You can pay month to month. If you want to prepay for a year, that's up to you for a little discount. But really the concept is you put it back on Latham to deliver the promise that we've given you. And so we don't want any more than what we deliver. And so that's important. When you're going to implement this, realize that there's very little risk involved and just a huge, huge upside and benefit. And then one other thing we like to always talk about is, I'm sure you can see, and we've talked about over 100 years, technology's changed immensely. And so one example I like to use is during the COVID era, we did have people that were still vital workers that had to report to work. They had fingerprint readers. Well, in those workplaces, they wanted a contactless way to clock in and out. Those customers were allowed to upgrade their units to face recognition devices, which were contactless devices, helped really solve a business issue. So we don't ever want a customer to think they bought something, made some small upfront investment for hardware, and then new technologies around the corner and they're stuck, right? And they've got to move on. That's not the case. If you've made an investment with us in hardware, when the next hardware comes to market, we offer a trade-up discount, extremely attractive offer on that. And by the way, sales team would hate me telling you this, but we're talking, these devices are in the few $100, $500 range. These aren't thousands of dollars for the devices. And we're talking about, for all of this automation for time tracking, $2 to $3 an employee at the most. So it's per month. So it's really not a huge investment with an extremely high upside of immediate return. So that's what you get with Latham. That's what you get when you add on Latham if you're a Greenshades customer, or if you're already a Latham customer, and you can take all those benefits and then get the automation and integration benefits of the Greenshades opportunity. So we're really excited.
Excellent. And I think that just speaking of time tracking, we're like right at the top of it. So we'll do a real quick run through of this slide. But I think throughout the duration of the webinar, you picked up on everything that we're talking about here. Is that you've got two organizations that are extremely tightly aligned, from our attitude on how we take care of clients and how we make sure that you never go it alone and you're getting maximum value out of your investment, all the way through just the way our solutions are designed to work together. It delivers that level of automation. It delivers that support for compliance on the payroll side as well, right out of the box. It's got that flexibility, that configurability. Lance gave a great example of COVID and the need to go contactless. That needed to happen right away, right? So having that flexibility, not just on the software side, but on the hardware side as well, is critical. I think you've heard stories from both sides as well. Easy to own, easy to scale, and then keeping pace with all of your changing needs as a business. Go back to the COVID example. It's a prime example of how that works. And again, that unwavering dedication to your success. You're never just a number to either company. You get personalized support. And we know that as a small or mid-sized business, that's critical, right? You can't sit and wait in a multi-day, multi-hour queue with something as mission critical as time, attendance, and payroll. So we take that to heart, and it's something you never have to wrestle with us. So with that, we still have quite a few people on the call. We're right at the top of our time. We've got a few questions that have come in. Why don't we just do like our top couple, and then for the other Q&As, we can we can maybe do in a blog post or something. But does that sound good? Is that good for you, Tom and Lance? We'll do
Sounds
one
good.
each.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Okay. So Lance, let's start with you, man. How do the clocks connect to the software? And then what happens if I lose connection to the internet? It's a great question that we get.
Yeah, excellent question. So I mentioned earlier, these are all internet connected devices. They need access to the internet from your local network. So that's Wi-Fi, Ethernet, even power over Ethernet if you have that in your company. So getting them access to network, it's just like installing a network printer. That simple. Literally plug it in the wall, connect it to the network. Great question about internet connectivity. A lot of people think when they lose the internet, the clock stopped working. That's not the case. All of the devices that we provide have backup capabilities to collect the punches while it's offline, still validating that the employee's who they are. It's their right, if it's their fingerprint or face, no problem. When it reconnects and the internet comes back up, automatically all that data is pushed automatically. There's nothing you need to do on your side. So every device works real time. Whether there's an internet connection or not, the data just, as soon as that connection is established, it pushes to the cloud.
Awesome. That store and forward component is so critical. That's awesome. Thank you. And then I think we'll close out, Tom. We got this one's probably for you. So how does a dedicated payroll platform tie in with my existing financial systems?
Sure. So if you're changing systems, what we can do is we can always take your pay history and then import it into our system itself. So that way we make sure that your taxes moving forward are calculating correctly, good to go. Every payroll as well, there is a few reports that are processed, one of which is whenever you set up with us, you can actually go through and tie out your general ledger accounts. So once you have your general ledger accounts in our system, we'll generate a report after every payroll of those accounts, of all the entries that you'd have to make. So you can either choose to manually make those entries by copying and pasting it into your system, or we have a method called the connector sync v2 that will take those entries and import it into your system. So it's very easy to take an existing system and add Greenshades to it and get the information back into your accounting packages as well.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. And I think that also hit another question that's further down around changing financial systems and its impact on payroll. So you knocked down two at the same time, man. What a pro. Good stuff.
Nice.
All right. So we are over time, folks. Thank you so much. We've got a really big group of people that stayed here after the top of the hour. So thank you for giving us a little extra time. As I mentioned, some of the other questions that came in, we'll make sure that we are, that we address them through another mean. We'll put our heads together collectively and figure out the best way to get that out to you. But Tom and Lance, gentlemen, this was fantastic. Thanks so much. Hopefully this will be the first of many. So we appreciate you delivering so much value to our clients. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time today.